Hello everybody and welcome back to the third part of my tutorial on digitalizing your sewing pattern with Valentina. And last time, if you remember, we created this panty crotch pattern piece. And I was wondering on how to mirror the two curves because we want identical curves on the upper and the lower side. And I found a solution. I don't know if there's an easier way, but it's not that hard, so I'm going to quickly explain it to you. What I did was I drew this curve with the curve tool, and then I get these two control points where I can just change them when I drag and drop them. What I can also do is I can actually write down exact values, and this comes in handy when mirroring two curves because in order to mirror this curve along this edge is to simply subtract my angle from 360 degrees and I get my mirrored angle. So if I take this one 200 degrees and I subtract it from 360 degrees, I get 160 degrees. And this is the angle for the control point on the lower edge. We're just gonna take the same lengths. So now you can see on this one that I have the same lengths, but I have different angles because these are the mirrored angles. 160 plus 200 is 360, and 45 plus 315, what we have here, is 360. So now we have perfectly mirrored curves. That's great. So as a next step, I would like to go back to my panty hip pattern piece. And now we want to go into details. And in order to do the details, we have to create a workpiece. And we do this by entering the detail mode, and then we select the workpiece tool. And we're just gonna select all of these pieces in a clockwise direction of these points, sorry. Press enter. And here we have our points. If it says down here ready, then that's fine. Sometimes if you didn't select them in clockwise direction, it's gonna give out an error. So just be aware of that. Press OK. Now we can go here into details mode and we have our clean pattern piece. Because in the drawing mode we have these lines which helped us build the pattern, but we don't actually want these lines later. So now we have the clean pattern piece, and what we can do now is some very useful stuff. Is, for example, we can add seam allowance in here. Seam allowance. And the basic seam allowance in this program is 1 centimeter. I can still change it in here if I want to, but I'm going to leave it like that. Press apply, and then we have seam allowance all around the pattern piece. But in my example here, I have a panty pattern and I'm gonna make it out of lace mostly. So I don't want seam allowance on the lower edge because that's where the lace is gonna have its decorative stitching. And on the upper edge, I'm gonna sew in some fold over elastic, so I also don't want any seam allowance up there. And I'm going to show you how to adjust the seam allowance for every edge. And this is done by selecting the nodes. So for the upper seam allowance, I'm going to select the point A, and as this is operating in clockwise manner, I'm just going to say that after this point I don't want any seam allowance. Press apply and it's gone. Now I have to do the same before A1. Before, no seam allowance, 0, apply. And the same thing for A4, after a full no seam allowance. And before A3, no seam allowance. All right. Now this is how I wanted it. Seam allowance only on the left and right sides. Okay. Now what we can also do is we can add a label. Or we can go to labels and we can fill in some label data. So the letter of my pattern piece is A. My pattern piece needs to be cut out 2 times. It's not unfold, and you can add some more information which I don't have right now. So this is just some basic information, and we can edit the template here. We need to add a new one, and I can fill in, for example, the name anti pattern piece. And then, which is very practical, I can insert variables. For example, the piece letter we just filled in. And then I can also say, okay, I need the quantity of my pattern piece in here. I want it to be in bold and centered. Okay. Now if we press apply, nothing's happening because we didn't activate it yet. We need to activate the label in here. And now we can see it, but it's super small. So I'm going to go up to 15 centimeters width and 5 centimeters height. Apply. Much better. And in the drawing mode, we can also add pins on points to mark some kind of reference point for a label or different markings. But right now I don't have any pins, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag it where I want it to be. That's also fine. And some more options. We can also add a grain line, which is very useful also in this case. Just gonna press apply, and it's very small, as you can see. I'm just gonna go up for about 10 centimeters. And also I'm going to rotate it because in my case it's the other way around. And I also just need the rear arrow. Okay, and I can also drag it, or I can also use a pin as reference point, which I don't have right now, but this is fine. So this is our pattern piece. Looks fine. Now we can also do the same thing for the second one.